And welcome to The Verdict. I'm Kent Myers, sitting in without Mick Cornett this week, but he'll be back next week. We're pleased you join us again for another show on The Verdict. We're going to talk about water. Water everywhere is what we've styled the show. Having grown up in Oklahoma in a time period where water was in very short supply in many parts of the state, I'm interested in how the cycle has changed from years of heaviest rainfall in history to years of drought, and how in the world the people that can try to control the water that's available to all of our citizens are able to deal with those kind of wild swings. We're going to be talking about that today with Dwayne Smith, the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. He's going to be talking about what the Water Resources Board is going to do about coming up with a comprehensive water plan. We've had a couple of shows in the past on the availability of water, how it's retained, how it may be or may not be available for sale outside the state. We're going to be talking about a lot of these things. The water supply is extremely important to our economy. It's important to you and me, and we're going to be talking about it today on The Verdict. Come back in just a minute.
In driving rain, blistering heat, and bitter cold, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, Chesapeake drills non-stop for natural gas on American soil. Chesapeake drills more new gas wells than anyone else, and from those wells collects the most drilling information and acquires more 3D seismic images, leveraging every efficiency to improve the odds of finding more natural gas every day with every well we drill. The better job we do of discovering bigger reserves of clean-burning American natural gas, the greater the prosperity of our nearby communities, our state, and our nation. And as long as there are more gas reserves to be found here in the U.S., we will never rest. Chesapeake. Natural gas wins the day.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers sitting in without Mick Cornett this week, but he will be back next week. And by the way, he sends his regards. I'm very pleased today to be able to introduce our guest, Dwayne Smith. Dwayne is the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. Did his undergraduate work at the University of Oklahoma in meteorology. Has been at the Oklahoma Water Resources Board about 11 years. He has extensive background in the water law and the management of water resources. He is the head of Oklahoma's comprehensive water plan, which is now being prepared. He is the chairman of the Western States Water Council, which includes 18 Western states, and he's the boss of that council. This is his, oh, by the way, don't let me forget, he's an award-winning public servant. Just recently, he was named the Distinguished Public Servant for Oklahoma for 2008, and that's out of a large inventory of people who are eligible for that award, so that's quite a nice award. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you. Tell us a little bit about the Water Resources Board. What is its mission? What does it do?
The Water Resources Board was formed in 1957 and primarily around water rights administration and water planning. We have a 9-member board that's appointed by the governor. They serve 7-year terms and represent various interests across the state, such as municipal use, industrial, agriculture, recreation, those types of things. Our mission is to manage the water resources of the state, and since 1957 we've added on significantly. Our water quality division sets water quality standards, does lake studies, those types of things. And then our financial assistance program has now loaned and has grants for over $1.6 billion to Oklahoma communities for water and wastewater infrastructure.
I have heard it said, but never by anyone that I necessarily had confidence they knew what they were talking about. And I've heard it said that Oklahoma has a lot more shoreline today of lakes and ponds and the like than it did 50 years ago. Is that true?
Well, we do. A great factoid for Oklahoma on water is we have more shoreline than any of the states on the eastern coast or anywhere. So we're very proud of that. We're very fortunate in Oklahoma to have over 27 major federal reservoirs that capture water, certainly provide water supply, but also recreational benefits across our state.
Well, I presume that's come about as not by accident, but by a lot of planning and a lot of work.
Absolutely, and there's, one of the big figures that comes across in water in Oklahoma is Senator Kerr. Former Senator Kerr had a major play in how our water resources were developed. The Kerr-McClellan navigation system and those federal reservoirs that we have, I believe wouldn't be here if it weren't for people like him.
I want to talk just a minute, but only a minute, about this recent study on the Illinois River and the water quality study. I take it that's really not within your jurisdiction, but what can we learn from the report about that?
Well, of course, the controversy is contamination based upon poultry litter application in the watershed in the Illinois River, and the issue is during runoff events, the over-application of the poultry litter is causing algae problems and turning, as an example, Lake Tenkiller to be greener than it would have been had that not occurred. And most recently, there's a study now and reports out on high bacteria counts on the Illinois River, which is an additional concern. That, of course, comes from warm-blooded animals, and to the extent that that's attributed to the poultry industry would have an additional concern for that. And that's all, of course, in the Attorney General's office, and General Edmondson is doing a very good job, an outstanding job representing Oklahoma in that.
I know that your board is active now in the Oklahoma Comprehensive Water Plan. Tell us what that is.
The first part of the Comprehensive Water Plan actually began in 1980. And we had an update in 1995, and now the legislature a couple of years ago appropriated to the Water Board $6.5 million to do the 2012 update of the Comprehensive Water Plan. And basically, what that does is plans Oklahoma's water for the future. In 1980, the plan was an east-west transfer of water, taking water from water-rich eastern Oklahoma, plans all the way to southwest and northwest Oklahoma. Those plans haven't come to fruition primarily because of the high cost of that. But here in central Oklahoma, though, we do get water from southeast Oklahoma. Atoka and McGee Creek reservoirs are brought up through the Atoka pipeline here to central Oklahoma, and a number of communities, not just Oklahoma City, benefit from that.
We did a water show a while back with a couple of fine guests, and they were talking about the amount of water that is lost in Oklahoma just because it flows out of the state, and that one way to make more water available to all of us is to do better on retention systems. Yes. Will your comprehensive water plan address anything like that?
It will address that. Primarily what it will do is look at supply and demand. What's the supply of resource in Oklahoma? And it's a vast supply. We have, I believe, flowing out of Oklahoma through the Arkansas and the Red River system, over 27 million acre feet a year flow out of Oklahoma. And just to put that into comparison, the entire state of Oklahoma, for all of its uses, municipal and agriculture, surface water and groundwater, only use about 2.2 million. So a vast supply of water in Oklahoma.
So that's about 13 years worth of water flows out every year.
The problem is that's in a normal year.
Yes.
And in a drought year, it's significantly less than that.
Yes.
And so being able to retain that water is critically important to us.
Let me kind of harken back to something I said in the open. A couple of years ago, we had a very dry year. And last year, we, I think, had one of the wettest years on record. How in the world, as a planner, without knowing when it's going to rain and when it's not. How can you deal with these wild swings?
Yeah. You know, a little bit more about the hydrology in Oklahoma. Since 1980, and for 20 years following that, we had the longest, wettest period in our history. That was followed by, for a 365-day period, the driest year in our history. That was immediately followed the next year for 365 days of the wettest year in our history. So, what kind of, what do you plan for? Well, certainly drought. Oklahoma is no stranger to drought.
Right.
Now, recently we haven't had a severe drought. Even though it was 1 year of the worst drought of history, it wasn't really that severe. We go back to the 30s and the Dust Bowl. We've had severe drought in Oklahoma. And, then we have the wet years, but what we try to plan for is the worst drought of record. We want all of our cities, all of our rural water districts to have supply during the worst drought of record.
Well, today, are there any areas of the state that are just underserved with water?
You know, this is, on one hand, we talk about how much water's in Oklahoma, and then on the other hand, we talk about those cities, those towns, those people that live in rural Oklahoma that have to haul water that don't have a future water supply. Primarily, our problem is infrastructure. Getting the water from the water-rich areas to the areas that need it is a great challenge for us, and it's primarily because of cost. The cost of putting that infrastructure in is, I think, something Oklahoma is going to have to face in the next few years. We're going to have to make sure that we have the financial resources to put that infrastructure in place.
Now, is the comprehensive water plan that we've talked about in just a few minutes ago, but we're going to talk a lot more about after the break, is that plan going, one aspect of it going to include what we need in regard to facilities and what the cost is
Absolutely.
likely to be?
I would say the centerpiece of the plan is going to be how it will be looking at cities and rural water districts. Are they meeting their current need? And then what's a realistic population projection and growth need for that community over the next 50 years, and are they meeting that need? If they're not, how are we going to meet that need? Evaluated certainly from a financial standpoint and a technical standpoint and an environmental standpoint.
And that's going to be community by community.
Absolutely.
Because one answer doesn't fit all areas of the state.
Exactly.
Well, we've got to step in here and take a break. Just stay right here because we'll be back. Folks, we're talking to Dwayne Smith, the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. We'll take a commercial break and see you in just a minute.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma Realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a plug nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers talking with Dwayne Smith, the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board, about the Oklahoma Comprehensive Water Plan, which will be finally finished and ready for evaluation in 2012. But it's going to cover a 50-year period, I believe.
Absolutely.
You mentioned in the first segment, Dwayne, that the 1980 philosophy of the plan was it was project-oriented, and the 1997 update was policy-oriented. What do you mean by those things?
By project-oriented in the 1980 plan was really the water transfer plan.
Yeah.
As you look at that, it has water lines, it's got cost estimates of actual infrastructure development to put that water transfer in place. The 1995 update, more of a policy update, where it didn't actually look at infrastructure, it looked more at the policy, in-stream flow protection, conjunctive use management, these types of things, private property rights protection, those types of activities that we look at as what we call the policy side of water law.
We just heard last week, we had the Speaker of the House, Chris Bench, on, and he talked about the need on roads and bridges and the fact that the legislature had passed a bond issue for $300 million for roads and bridges. Do you have any sense of what the cost is going to be in the comprehensive plan to be able to make sure that our needs for the next 50 years are taken care of?
Working with the DEQ, or
Yes.
Department of Environmental Quality, we've done some estimates of the water and wastewater infrastructure need for our communities over the next 50 years, excuse me, over the next 20 years.
20 years.
And that estimate is at about $5.4 billion.
Wow.
That's for, and primarily that's replacing aging infrastructure.
Now, is that cost that's going to have to be borne not only by the state but by the municipalities as well? I mean,
Absolutely. It's really borne by the municipalities. Our current way of doing business is they get loans, and we have a very effective program of low interest loans for our communities. But in the final analysis, the ratepayer, in other words, the citizen that's using the water, is going to pay those loans back.
any federal funding available for that, for this?
We do have some matching monies available through EPA and what we call our state revolving fund, where we get $5 for every $1 of state money that we put in. That money goes into a loan program and actually revolves. So the money, I wouldn't say is actually spent.
Yeah.
It's used to give loans. When that money's paid back, it goes to more loans. And so that's been a very effective way for our communities to get financing.
Now, this comprehensive water plan, the first study was project-oriented, the second study was policy-oriented. What's this third study going to be?
I would say it's a combination of those. And from the policy standpoint, we've already had 42 public meetings across Oklahoma where we've had several thousand people come to the public meetings. We are now going to have regional meetings to identify the issues throughout Oklahoma related to water. And it'll culminate in a town hall meeting where we actually then come up with recommendations that would go to the legislature on what we think water policy should be. From the technical side, what's different from the 1980 plan in project development is that was more of a regional plan. This plan for 2012 is going to bring it to a provider level. We're going to take that regional plan down to a different level. We're going down to every community, every rural water district for their plan for the next 50 years.
And you're going to, I can see why it takes a while to get that together. That's an awful lot of work. But the goal, I guess, is to get it completed by 2012?
Our goal is completed by 2012, and that's difficult. You know, we're implementing part of the plan now. So part of it's implementation, part of it's planning. But you know, one of the main issues affecting Oklahoma is regionalization of small systems and rural water districts, small communities, rural water district. And because of the high cost of replacing infrastructure, and in some cases, particularly in northwest Oklahoma, where we're predicting that the population will at best stay even, some actually declining population, it's going to be very difficult for those communities to maintain their level of water and wastewater infrastructure. So regionalization, I think that's in our picture. And one of the things that we're going to do in this plan is to try to go to these districts and find ways that we can effectively do that, of course, with their concurrence.
The current legislature, I take it, is watching what you do with some interest and encouraging your work.
Absolutely. They not only appropriated the money, but we've had a number of legislators come to our public meetings. This last session, we had a couple of bills passed, authored by Senator Paddock, on looking at recharge and looking at brackish water supplies that come up under the water plan. So they're keeping a very close eye, and thankfully so, on the water plan activities.
Now, I guess the water in Oklahoma, of course, ultimately comes from above, but some is retained in reservoirs underground, and some flows through streams and in lakes and the like. How do you manage the underground reservoir problem?
Our current law is really separated into two parts: our groundwater law and our streamwater law. Our groundwater law is based upon a private property right. If you own land, then you own the water underneath that land.
If I can capture it,
If you can capture it, that's right. Streamwater is public water. It's an appropriation doctrine, so the first permit in time has the best right. If I have a permit, you come in tomorrow with your permit application. In times of drought, the senior water right holder has the best right. One of the issues that we've seen is the conjunctive nature in which groundwater interacts with surface water. And in some cases, we particularly in the Panhandle, in the Beaver North Canadian River, the groundwater pumpage in the Ogallala has actually impacted the surface flow. And so this has been one of the topics that's coming out in some of our public meetings, is people want to understand what can we do to protect both groundwater and surface water from depletion.
I don't want this show to revolve around the pending litigation, but I know there is pending litigation dealing with the potential sale of Oklahoma water to outside the borders. I take it your board is not a party to that case or not involved in it.
Well, we are the source of the litigation. Actually, we're named on the lawsuit. And so that lawsuit really centers around the article of interstate commerce that water is. And this goes back to a Supreme Court case between Kansas and Colorado, what they call the Sporhays case. And the U.S. Supreme Court said that water is an article of interstate commerce. And basically what it does is say that one state cannot arbitrarily say that another state can't get water. So to come up and say there's a moratorium on out-of-state use that discriminates against another state, that is what that U.S. Supreme Court case and our lawsuit with the Tarrant County Regional Water Authority is about.
So that, I guess, becomes down to a determination of what's arbitrary and what's rational, for which there's a reasonable basis. Well, let's go back to the major components of your update. What do you think the policy development component's going to look like?
You know, I think that we're going to, it's hard to tell. I don't want to predetermine what those are going to be, but I do think that since 1980, there's a lot of things that have happened. Our current groundwater law was in 1972. And so at that time, there wasn't a Clean Water Act. There wasn't an Endangered Species Act. We didn't have the water quality issues or were aware of the water quality issues at the time that was passed. And what we're hearing around the state is that needs to be brought in to our water planning in the future. In other words, we don't want to develop water resources that's going to cause another endangered species or is going to dry up surface waters or groundwaters. We want to make sure that we have sustainable water for the future and for future growth in Oklahoma. And I think that's going to be one of the very important discussions that we have in our water plan.
You mentioned earlier that you've had a good number of public meetings. We just have about a minute left. A good number of public meetings. What kind of public participation are you looking for?
We've had outstanding participation. We're averaging about 85 per meeting. We've had 42 meetings.
Just around the state?
Around the state and all parts of Oklahoma, great participation.
Are you going to keep doing that?
We're going to, that was the base level of meetings.
Yes.
Then we're going to regional meetings. It's going to be 30 people per region, and we're going to culminate that in a town hall. So it's, I believe, unprecedented as we look at what other states have done in public participation. We're trying to do more than any of them, and I think at the end of the day, it's going to prove dividends.
Well, now, what can the average citizen, be they a citizen in a downtown Oklahoma City or in a small community in western or eastern Oklahoma, what can they do to put their mark on this study and make their views known?
Well, absolutely plug into the water plan. We have a website that they can get
on your regular water resources board.
On our regular water resources board
and
website.
We'll give that website.
We'll get that announcement.
A little bit.
That's full of information. Don't believe the rumors. try to get facts behind, you know, what we found throughout Oklahoma is a number of people have different versions of what they believe the water law is or should be. And make sure you find out the facts for yourself and make those determinations.
Well, Dwayne, we're out of time. Thank you so much for coming for this show. We'll invite you back to do another one as things develop. Please come back and see us.
Thank you.
We've been visiting with Dwayne Smith, the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. I'll be right back.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Kent Myers just finishing the show with Dwayne Smith, the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Water Resources Board. We thank Dwayne for coming and talking about water policy with us and what we're going to be doing for the next few years in Oklahoma to make sure we stay with plenty of water. In that connection, I'd like to give you Dwayne's website at the Water Resources Board, where you can get clued into the comprehensive plan and all that's going on. It's www.owrb.ok.gov. And don't forget our website, theverdict.tv. Mick will be back next week. Thanks for joining us.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.